if you're a firstborn, which you are, being an only child, I guess, means you're firstborn as well. But if you're a firstborn, there is the day, Erev Pesach is considered to be Ta'anit B'chorot, which means the fast of the firstborn. Alex, are you a firstborn? Are you an eldest? No, okay, so you don't have to worry about this. Okay. Why is that? So, first of all, because the firstborns were saved from being destroyed when HaKadosh Baruch Hu went through the land of Egypt and he killed the firstborns. He did not kill the Jewish firstborns. Therefore, there is a halacha that the firstborn children should fast on Erev Pesach. Now,
should we have a feast instead?
We're gonna get to that.
They tried to kill us. It didn't work. Let's eat.
No, over here it was God that was doing the killing. Slightly different, which is why God didn't kill me. Let's fast, right? Rather than they try to kill us and we survived. Let's eat. However,
Why was it specifically the firstborns?
Because the firstborns were the ones that were the Jewish firstborns, the ones that were saved.
Okay, fine.
So there,
if you're not firstborn, you don't have to fast?
No. Unless you're a pathologically disturbed middle child, and then
It would seem that I've been raised that way.
Is it because the redemption hadn't begun?
When, what, who, which, where?
When the firstborn,
Were killed, yeah.
the redemption hadn't begun.
Yes. So, therefore,
So is that why the firstborn who didn't die fast?
oh, I mean, yes, in theory. What's the pshat? The plague of the firstborn was really supposed to hit everybody, all the firstborn, including the Jews. And because they hadn't been taken out of Egypt yet, they were included inside of the decree. That's why the Jews had to place the blood on the doorposts, right, in order to show God that they were dedicated enough to doing God's will, that God could pass over. That's why Passover is called Passover, Pesach. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu Pasach, he passed over the houses of the Jewish people. Just before we get going, there's a fascinating little machlokas disagreement amongst the early authorities. You know, everybody here, for years and years, I also had the same approach. If I were to ask you, when God asked the Jewish people to smear blood on the doorposts and the lintels of their homes, right? Where would you imagine you were supposed to do that? Right, on the front door, right, facing outwards, presumably, because the whole point of this was to show the Egyptians that we weren't scared of them using lamb blood, which was something which the Egyptians worshipped the sheep. So you can imagine that taking a lamb and smearing its blood on the front door must have been a pretty provocative thing to do, right? And the Jewish people are telling the Egyptians, we're not scared of you, we don't care, God's going to take care of us. That's the way that I always understood it for years, right? Really, that's the one that seems to make the most sense. However, there are early authorities who say that they were commanded to smear the blood on the inside of the door, not the outside. Right? So what's the connection over there? Why do they do it on the inside? Because then they have a constant reminder that they're doing what God wants them to do. The question over here is who's being proved what over here? If we're proving to the Egyptians that we're not scared of them, then you paint the outside of the door. If we're proving to ourselves that we're going to do what God wants us to do, regardless of how dangerous it is, then we're going to have it on the inside so that we can have a constant reminder. What happened over there? I don't know which one it was. I mean, maybe one of you remembers.
Was it
I don't. Huh? It doesn't say, but I don't know anyone who says both. Interestingly enough, which of course that would take care of the problem, right? But it's not. I mean, anyone of stature.
Right, fine.
I read, maybe it was where I read somewhere that it wasn't the door itself, that it was
the doorpost,
the lintel,
the doorpost, the two sides of the doorpost and the lintel on the top. Yeah. I'll tell you, there's the most incredible Rav Hirsch over here, Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, who explains like this. We've done this in the past before, but it's worth hearing it because it really is a very fundamental idea. He says, why on earth did God want them to smear the doorpost and the lintel? The lintel is the bar on the top. So surely one place is enough. Why do you have to do both? So he says that your home offers you two different kinds of protection. Your home gives you physical protection, which is against the elements, so it gives you shade and it keeps the wind off and it keeps the rain out and all of those kinds of things, and that's represented by the roof, right? So you paint the top, the lintel of the door frame to show that your house is a physical protection for you, but your house is also a spiritual protection, which means that you can't control what is going on outside of your home. Right? When you step outside the house, you can't control the advertisements and the billboards and the people that you'll see wandering around in the streets. What you can control, though, is the atmosphere and the environment inside of your home. The spiritual dimensions of your home, that's for you. And explains Rav Hirsch, the blood on the doorpost represents the spiritual protection that the home offers you, because the walls are the cutoff point between what's going on outside and what's going on inside. Now, Rav Hirsch doesn't say this, but I think it's clear that that's the reason why it's painted on the doorposts and not on the door itself. Because the door itself is something which is portable, right? You can open the door, close it, or you can take it off its hinges as well, relatively easily, which means it's not going to offer the protection that we're talking about. However, the doorposts, which are cemented into the wall, are something that are much more substantive than the door itself, and maybe that's the reason why we're commanded to put on the doorpost, not on the door itself. Anyway, it's just a side issue. I thought it was something rather interesting, but I'm looking around the room and I can see that I would go out on a limb and say that absolutely nobody agrees with that. So we will just return back to the fast of the firstborn, which I think that even people who are not yet Jewish should be doing every single day, just to get into the shape. I'm trying to get a reaction out of somebody. It's just not working today. Huh?
If we keep quiet, we say something. It keeps going.
Oh yeah. The prevalent custom is for the firstborn not to fast on Erev Pesach, but rather to go to shul in the morning, and somebody in shul is going to make a siyum, which means somebody is going to have learnt a tractate of the Gemara, and that obligates what's called a sudas mitzvah. When somebody does that in public and finishes up a tractate, you're supposed to have something to eat, and that's thing. Huh? You don't have to wash, and of course it's rather difficult to wash because it's Erev Pesach, which means there's a problem with having chametz lying around and everything. So you'll find that what's being served up in shul on Erev Pesach is normally rather like simple non-chametz food and non-matzah food as well, because at that point you're not supposed to be eating matzah either. A place where I daven in, they normally serve up lots of nuts and macaroons and things like that, which don't really have. Yeah. Is
it the siyum that triggers it? And if that's the case, does it have to be a result of having completed a tractate?
Yeah.
Could it be any?
Okay, so the siyum is what triggers it, right? First of all, before we go any further, the halacha is that the firstborn should be listening to the siyum as well, which it's not enough just to come waltzing at the end of davening and have the food because everyone started eating because this fellow's made a siyum, but rather you should hear the siyum as well, to be a participant within the ending, with the learning of that particular tractate. Under normal circumstances, a siyum is made over a tractate of Gemara, right? Any tractate, or it could be made over the completion of a Seder of Mishnah. Now the Mishnah is split up into 6 different orders, and somebody who finishes a whole order is able to make a siyum as well, which would trigger off the concept of making a Suda and it becoming a proper siyum. Under certain circumstances, it's possible to make a siyum over finishing up one of the books in Nach as well, in the prophets, but it's something which needs to have been learnt in depth, right? So again, I mean, there are different options. The classic option is to somebody normally finishes up a tractate. Lots of people are learning; they're learning the whole time, so they just time it to make sure that they've reached the end in order to be able to make the siyum in shul. You do not have to be a firstborn to make the siyum. Anybody can make a siyum. Anyone sitting over here could make the siyum in shul, regardless of whether you are or whether you're not a firstborn. And then all the participants are able to be a part of that simcha, to be a part of that siyum, and then they can eat. And if you do that, then you don't have to fast anymore. Once you've been a part of the siyum, then you have no obligation to fast, and you're off the hook. Just what's considered to be a firstborn? Well, the machlokes amongst the poskim, amongst the authorities, under normal circumstances, a firstborn means somebody who was born under natural circumstances. Right? What is natural circumstances is not, for example, a caesarean section, which is not considered to be a natural birth according to halacha. However, for the fast of the firstborn, there is a machlokes, and therefore, if somebody is a firstborn son who was born through a C-section, then it would be better for them to join into a siyum just to make sure, right, just to cover their bases. I think over here it's really not an issue because I don't know how many of you were actually born naturally at all. Most of you look like you were just found under a rock somewhere and whatever.
It's a nice rock.
A firstborn under bar mitzvah does not have to fast. What is interesting is there is a custom that the parent, the father of the
Oldest?
of the oldest should participate in the siyum for his son. Right? Again, you've got a son who's under bar mitzvah, your oldest son is under bar mitzvah. He doesn't have an obligation to fast because he's not yet bar mitzvah, but there is a custom that the father of the boy goes to shul and davens with the minyan and is a part of the siyum over there to fulfill the child's, not obligation, but at least to be doing something over here. Firstborn girls do not have to fast, even though there is a custom amongst some Sfardim that firstborn girls do fast. But because it says that the whole reason that we were let out of Egypt was in the merit of the ladies, what's called the Noshim Tzidkonios, the righteous ladies, who are the ones that kept us attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu whilst we were there in slavery. They were the ones who kept us focused on our spiritual dimensions. Therefore, women don't have to fast. Like I said, in some certain Sephardic communities, the women, firstborn ladies, do fast. If that applies to you, you should ask your local neighborhood rabbi what you're supposed to do. I'm looking around the room, and I'm not quite sure why I said that, because I don't see any firstborn ladies sitting over here. I mean, unless you know something that I don't know, but whatever.
The less you know, the better.
Yeah, that's what I tried telling my teachers as well in school, actually, but they didn't seem to go for that for some reason. I don't know. On Erev Pesach, right, we spoke about collecting the chometz, we spoke about looking for the chometz on the night of Erev Pesach. In the day, we've got to burn the chometz. There is a mitzvah to burn at least a kazayas of chometz, which is, again, it's a volume, it's not very much, it's probably, like a piece of bread, slice of bread, right, would be enough to take care of that. And that means that it's important that you leave over a kazayas of chometz to burn on the morning of Erev Pesach. If you were so super organized that you managed to clean out all of your chometz, you ate it all before Pesach in order to make sure you don't have any left over, and you suddenly realize on Erev Pesach that you don't have any chometz left in your possession at all, it would be correct to go to somebody who seems to have a lot left over and buy from them a kazayas worth of chometz in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of burning the chometz on Erev Pesach.
Could we just burn the firstborn instead?
I think in order to make sure that you're doing that properly, you probably have to stuff his pockets full of chometz first, just to cover all your bases, I think. Yeah. You know what they say about kids? Kids are so cute when they're 4 years old that you wish you could eat them. Right? When they're 14, you wish you had. So I think by the time you want to try and get around to doing what you've just suggested, it'll be probably too late, I imagine. But what did I want to tell you something else about burning the chometz, but I can't remember what it is. Okay, we spoke about the idea of you have to make the nullification, which is called chamira v'chamia, that all of the stuff that you've got, all the chametz that you've got, is like dust and ashes. Not just the chametz that you're burning over there on Erev Pesach, but all the chametz that you're keeping in your possession as well, and the chametz that you're not aware of, the chametz that you are aware of. But you should only say kol chamira v'chamia after you've thrown your kazayis worth of bread into the fire. Now, your kazayis doesn't have to be bread. I'm sorry, it could be any kind of chametz, which means it could be pretzels, it could be biscuits, it could be cake. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
But some people
He's in a
they
trance.
also, well, like if they have more than one home, they also sign off the ownership of the entire second home rather than deal with the chametz.
Yeah.
Because I'm signing to take over the rights of people's homes.
Yeah, that's why you're smiling like that. Huh?
Well, I'm curious, like, how much do they really mean it, and how far does that extend legally? Like,
So I'll tell you
can I
like
just
this.
walk into these people's homes?
It's an interesting thing. We
Not
spoke
that
about
I
it the
would.
other day, right? Anybody who owns multiple homes. So part of the problem is like this: if you own another home, you really need to check it for Pesach. The only way that you don't check it for Pesach, I mean, the two things you do. The first thing that you do, let's say for example, you've got one home here and you've got one home in America, right? So it's difficult to be in both places at once to check. The best way to do it is to send somebody into whichever home you're not in, and to have them be your agent to check to see what to make what's called a bedikas chametz. If that's not possible, then you have to do what's called a mechiras yud gimel, which is that you're selling on the 13th of Nisan. You're going to sell the whole house is going to be sold with its contents, everything, right? And that way, even if there's chametz in the house, you've taken care of your obligation. How far-reaching is this? So again, I think it's very important. I think it's really very important to understand this properly, because a lot of people look at the selling of chametz as being a little bit of a joke, right? Which means that I put my whiskey in the little cupboard over there, and I tell the rabbi, but I tell him it's in a cupboard. I'm not going to tell him which one because otherwise he'll come and he'll take it. So I'll tell him it's in a different one instead. And that's not that the shtar for selling chametz, the contract for selling chametz is a bona fide contract. It's 100% legal. And that means that when the contract is signed and passed over to the non-Jew, in theory, everything that's contained inside of that contract now belongs to the non-Jew. But we spoke about like the other day, can the non-Jew go into the homes, all these homes that he's now become the owner of? Yes, he can. But by doing that, he triggers off the sale. Right, you hear the problem? The problem is like this, that the non-Jew this is not being given to him gratis, it's being given to him with a condition. It's a conditional sale, which means that you've got 8 days to make up your mind whether you want to make the sale complete or not. If you do, by making any kind of an action which shows your ownership over the places, you then trigger off the sale.
Which means I'm obligated to then buy the house.
It means that you're obligated to spend, to cough up the money.
Or does it reverse the transaction? Is it really create a financial liability?
Yes,
And that could
yes,
Or does it
And then I would
cause...
cause them to transgress by going into their house.
yes, it does.
So, I always thought it reversed the transaction. That it just simply made it null and void to begin with.
No, you can't do that, because if you make it null and void, then you're stuck. Because on Erev Pesach you sold your chametz, and it's completely forbidden for you to own chametz on Pesach. And if the contract is now null and void in the middle of Pesach, that means you've just become the owner of your original chametz, which is a problem. It's even worse because you won't even know about it, right?
Right.
Which means here you've got somebody who owns a piece of property over here, and he's in America for Pesach, and now somebody whatever it's now the contract's become null and void. He's got no idea, and that means that he's.
So if that was the case, hypothetically, what would happen if let's say that dwelling caught fire or something, without any responsibility placed on the person who entered at all?
Yeah, it's the same thing again, which means that until the non-Jew who's bought the property has exercised his rights over that property, then nothing will change. Which is even if something terrible happens over Pesach and the apartment is burnt down, right? The apartment after Pesach is finished and the non-Jew has not exercised his right will revert back to the ownership of the Jew anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Now, how do we get around that? There is a little bit of an Indian over here, right? How do we get around okay, let's say, for example, the non-Jew has been eyeing your property for a long time already. He's your next door neighbor, right? And he would really like to buy it from you, but you don't want to sell it. And then you sell it to him for mechiras chometz, because you're going away for Pesach. And now he thinks to himself, you know what, fine, I'm going to exercise my rights and I'm going to buy this piece of property and then it'll be mine. How do we get around that problem? The amounts that the potential sales are vastly inflated. Which means, let's say you've got a house which is worth $500,000, so the worth of the house will be written into the contract at, let's say, $2 million. I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers, right? But the figure is high enough to stop the non-Jew from buying it because the price is prohibitive.
Or high enough that if he were to exercise the rights, the family
You wouldn't care, right? You wouldn't care. In fact, you'd be happy to come home and find all your stuff in the street, right? Because you know what? You just cleaned up like a bandit, for sure, for sure.
Would the Beis Din have to do it, or would it be just the community rabbi? Like who?
Who's selling and who's buying? So normally, as a rule, the local neighborhood rabbi is the person that you go to, and you say to him, look, this is what I'm selling, and he'll write it down on his piece of paper. He'll make with you what's called a kinyan, an acquisition, which means that you have to appoint him your shaliach, your agent, right? So after he's written down all the details, he'll give you his pen, and you'll lift it up. And that's now the kinyan. You've now made a contractual agreement between yourselves that he's going to represent you. And then at some point before Pesach, he's going to pass this. Now, if he knows what he's doing, then he'll have a non-Jew that he sells his chometz to on a regular basis and finished. If he's not completely conversant with all the halachas, then he'll take it to the local Beis Din, the local court, Jewish court, and the Jewish court will take care of it. Just something you need to know, by the way, in general. We've gone a little bit off Erev Pesach halachas, but you know what? It's kind of important. When you not yet. When you sell your chometz, if you own a share portfolio, which many people do, right? Either, because if you've got first of all, you've got some kind of retirement fund, so very often your retirement fund is invested in shares. Somebody who's got their own share portfolio, you need to know that some of your shares have probably got, their ownership in chometz related things. So for example, if you've got shares, let's say for example, you've got shares in Macy's, right? So Macy's sell food, they don't just sell clothing. So that means that you've got a share inside of the whole store. Not just you don't buy a share in one particular department. You buy a share in the whole thing. Let's say you've got shares in something even more obvious. Let's say you've got shares in a whiskey company, right? If that's the case, right now, again, what's the problem? Lots and lots of these enormous companies, you don't even know everything that they've got. They're so spread out and they've got investments in so many different things, right? And you imagine that you're investing in a company that deals with car parts, right? But in reality, this company is so big that it's got investments in McDonald's and it's got investments in all kinds of chometz-related endeavors, and you're not even aware of it, which means that inside of the contract that's being drawn up by the rabbi that you're selling your chometz to, you need to let him know that you've got shares, and he'll take care of those as well. Again, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have any bearing on you, nothing's going to happen to your shares, but just you need to know that there is a tzad in the halacha, there is an opinion in the halacha which says that if you've got shares, you're not allowed to own shares that have chometz related. What's it?
So
Like I'm relying on you to finish up the sentence, but you're not doing it.
So what do you do with a company like Seagram's?
Yeah, so you would need to right. So you would need to sell your personal shares. Should be part of the mechiras chometz. When you come and sell your chometz to the rabbi, you're selling any shares that you've got that may be chometz related. right? Again, does it have any practical impact? It doesn't have any practical impact on you whatsoever. What happens with Seagrams themselves, which is a company owned by a Jew? The truth is, I don't even know if they own the company anymore, or if I don't even know if they're majority shareholders anymore. But hopefully, we're working on the premise. We hope that the Bronfman family are going to be selling their chometz as well, and within that, they'll be selling their share of their companies that have got chometz. It's a big endeavor. This chometz owning companies is a big thing. I mean, here in Israel, the largest companies that are sold on the stock markets are things like Strauss and Tnuva, right? Food companies,
Awesome.
and Osem, right? And they're full of chometz, so they take care of all of their mechiras. Chometz is taken care of. They sell all of their chometz before Pesach, and everything is done according to halacha, and it's fine. Over here in Israel, it's really not very complicated at all, actually.
Would you do it by account? Like, let's say you had investments in these various companies. It wouldn't be done by positions held.
No.
Like the whole account.
No, not at all. What you're doing is that you're again, the same way you're selling your apartment, you're selling your shares to a non-Jew, the rights to your shares to a non-Jew over Pesach, and then after Pesach ends and he hasn't taken up the rights, then the shares revert back to your possession, to your ownership.
Isn't there a stipulation on when you write up the sale that if you do sell it to a guy, and you said he has a right to come in, yeah, but isn't there also a stipulation that right after Pesach, a certain time?
Yeah, which means again, what's going on? He's got which means that he's got a specific amount of time to exercise his right. If he doesn't do that, then at some point the chometz will revert back to your possessions. Will revert back to you; they'll become yours.
If he does go in, that triggers the sale.
Right.
But can you say I'm going to rent it to you? Can you rent it?
No, because you can't. Because when you're renting something, what are you doing? You're owning it, which means that's one of the reasons why, when you sell your chometz in your house, we spoke about this the other day. When you sell your chometz in your house, you have to put up signs for wherever your chometz is being kept, right? So even if you're not keeping real chometz, you're not keeping bread and rolls, right? But for example, you've got whiskey in a cupboard. So on that cupboard, you need to put chometz. Put up a sign which lets you know that there's chometz over there, so that when the contract is written, it will say over there that the chometz has been placed inside of cupboards that have got a sign on it saying, easily identifiable sign. Yeah.
The shares seems to be a different situation than the house, because to exercise the rights of shares really means to sell them. But once the non-Jew has already sold the shares, what mechanism is there to then protect or
again? Because what are you doing? You're saying like this, and let's say you've got shares which are worth $1,000, right? You're selling your rights to those shares for $5,000. So in effect, it's really like the house all over again.
So if I sell the shares for like $1,200 and make a profit, someone's signed over the rights of their shares to me worth $1,000, and I go find somebody to buy them for $2,000.
Yeah.
Is there something in the contract that would then trigger me owing the Jew?
Yeah, for sure.
$3,000 or some prohibitive amount?
For sure.
Okay, so it would be the same as the house.
Yeah. Which means that it's got to be enough to stop you from wanting to do that.
So I would have to find somebody to buy it for that prohibitively high amount. Which would never happen.
No.
Okay.
Again, with your personal portfolio, it may not be such a big deal, right? But when you're talking about a business which is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So you've got to be very careful with all these things. They've got to be, the contract has to be written very carefully, and they've got to be written in such a way that you really are covered properly, right? And that's why the rabbis are doing these things to make sure that everything is going to be done in as beneficial a way as possible for you.
How was this handled in times in communities where Jews did not have access to trustworthy non-Jews?
They did not. First of all, many places they didn't sell chometz at all. Right. So what did they do with their chometz? They ate it. They finished it before Pesach, and they didn't have any chometz left over. And people, for example, that were selling historically, the only people possibly that might have been in a very precarious position were people that owned distilleries. Jews were very big in making alcohol, which they sold to the non-Jews, and a lot of alcohol, of course, is being made with chometz related ingredients. So then, what did they do at that point? I don't know. It's an interesting question. What did they do? Would they have found somebody that they could sell it over to? Most communities had what was called a Shabbos goy, which was somebody who wasn't Jewish who was there, who could be relied upon in case there were things that had to be done. Sometimes somebody's not well, somebody's got to take care of them, light a fire, that kind of stuff. So I would imagine that in most communities there was somebody they felt that they could sell their chometz to, although I imagine that there were probably places where maybe they couldn't, and what happened then I'm not quite sure. We should ask Rabbi Wein maybe what historically what
Can you put the
was
rights
done.
of the business on some kind of contract and say it's hefker, and then leave it somewhere that practically can't be accessed? That way nobody owns it, but realistically no one's going to be able to get to it.
So how do you sell the chometz?
You're not selling it. You're just not taking ownership of it.
You're relinquishing your ownership over, let's say you've got a warehouse full of whiskey, right? So you're relinquishing your ownership over that warehouse.
So the first person to pick up this contract becomes the owner, but
It's more than that. It's a problem. It's a problem because you don't need the contract. You don't need the contract in order to be able to become the owner of that whiskey. You just have to go into the warehouse.
No, I'm saying imagine like a community in the middle of nowhere where there's no non-Jews at all.
Right.
And one of the Jews owns a business that deals with chometz.
Yeah.
Can they sign the rights onto a contract, or not a contract, but a statement that says it's hefker?
Right. And then if
They
it's
just give it
hefker,
up.
what have you done? If it's hefker,
If nobody picks up the contract physically, then it reverts back.
you don't have to pick up the contract. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyone that goes into those warehouses
Any act
is
of
become.
requisition would mean
That means that you've now taken ownership over what's going on.
But put
Right.
the contract on the top of a tower.
No, you're not.
You're not
Forget
understanding.
the contract.
The contract is not what you pick up.
It's
in
the
order to
action.
take ownership. You go into the warehouse, and then the warehouse becomes yours.
You listen. You own this warehouse, and you've just made it hefker, right?
Yeah.
What does hefker mean? It has no ownership. How do I now take ownership of that warehouse by going in?
So can you just lock it up? And
No, because then it's not hefker. It's a problem. I think it's probably easier just to sell it to a non-Jew. Actually, I really do.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, these things are very not complicated because, there's a whole question inside of the halacha is selling, there are forms that you can fill out over the internet, right, for selling chometz over the internet, whether that's really considered to be 100% halachically okay or not. It's better to go to a real person and to sell your chometz through your local neighborhood rabbi. It's a very easy process, and it's a very simple process. There is a custom to give the rabbi a little bit of money, right? Really, what are you giving money for? You're not giving him money to help out with the contractual agreements over here. That doesn't cost anything at all. I think it's just to help him out with his Pesach, Pesach expenses.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be very much. There is also an inyan within the halacha that people that are in yeshiva don't have to pay for selling their chometz. So it sounds like another reason why it might be a great idea just to stay in yeshiva, right, and never leave, because then you'll never have to pay for selling your
What about
chometz.
this? There was problems in New York. I remember the rabbi couldn't find a guy at night.
He couldn't find the non-Jew that he'd sold the...
Back, right.
Oh, what happens then? Yeah, it's a little bit of a problem because they have to go. The rabbi and the non-Jew at the end of Pesach have to go through a little ceremony over there where he gives up his rights to everything that he's bought, and the contractual agreement now comes to an end. If the non-Jew is not there, what happens? I don't know. You need to find out. I don't know. You need to find out,
He used
right?
to say, "Do not eat chometz yet." I'm waiting for the guy.
This could be. It could be. But many shuls, I'll tell you, for example, I don't know, it's probably like this in America as well, but in many shuls, the custodian of the shul is a non-Jew. I don't know, there's lots of shuls that I know of in England. He lived on the premises, and that was one of the things that was his job, was that's who the chometz was sold to. There's a cute thing over here in Israel. The state of Israel, of course, is the owner of huge amounts of chometz. So they also have a non-Jew, an Arab from Abu Ghosh, which is just outside of Yerushalayim, and that family has been the family that the state sells its chometz to, year after year after year, and you're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of chometz that are being sold, and it's like momentarily for a few days this person is like the owner of huge amounts of chometz, whatever. I mean, I think it's cute.
Is that a government position? Like, is that a...
What, to be the official non-Jew? It's not a government. It's not a government position, but it's interesting that it stayed in the same family for a few generations. Yeah, I guess so, right? The court Jew, right? the other way around. Anyway, a little bit more over here. On Erev Pesach, it's forbidden to do work. Now, for some of you, that may not be such a big deal because you don't work anyway. So it's just another day that you're not going to do work on. But for people like Binyamin, it is forbidden to do work on Erev Pesach. What is doing work? What are we talking about? Work is going to be defined over here as work for profit, earning money for profit, or even if you're working for free, but it's what's called Malacha Gemora. If you have a question about whether what you're going to do is work or not, you need to speak to a competent Orthodox rabbi to find out.
Well, there are 39 prohibitions for Shabbos.
Yeah, but no, over here, it's not that, because, for example, on Erev Pesach you can cook. There's no problem with cooking for Erev Pesach. There's no problem with kindling lights, and there's no problem with, but there's a problem from Chatzot, from midday onwards. There's a problem with being at work, for example. So let's say a person's, they've got a professional position and they're an accountant. From midday on Erev Pesach, they should really not be working anymore.
Same with Erev Shabbos, right?
Huh?
Same with Erev Shabbos.
Erev Shabbos, yeah, but that's a little less of a.
You can't have time
You can work,
prepare for Shabbos.
but you can work every shot till light candles.
You're talking Thursday, right?
No, this year I'm talking about Thursday. Yeah, Thursday afternoon, right?
That's
It says
Friday. You mean Friday.
Friday after when
No,
Shabbos, right?
next
Come on.
Thursday.
The halacha, the Mishnah Berurah says something quite sharp actually. He says that anybody who does forbidden work from after midday on Erev Pesach will never see a siman bracha. He'll never see anything positive from any of this. Right, which is a...
It says the Erev Shabbos, the same.
Sorry?
It says the same Erev Shabbos.
We're learning halachas of Pesach, Erev Pesach over here.
It's not so chomer on Erev Shabbos.
Huh?
It says the same lashon.
I know, it is interesting. I mean, most people are working, people are working for other people, right? Yeah. So they don't normally have the luxury to, to be able to take off on Fridays from Chatzos Hayom onwards. I don't know, need to look into it. I don't know, need to look into it. So, for example, here, ironing, that's one of the examples that's brought in the halacha, right? Can you iron from midday on Erev Pesach onwards? So the answer is, if it's simple ironing, then you can do it. But if it's something which is more complicated, then you have to give it over to be done by a non-Jew. It's okay for a non-Jew to do that on Erev Pesach, but it's not okay for you to do it. Again...
But he's not getting paid.
Who? The non-Jew?
No,
Why not? The Jew.
When he's ironing, he's for...
It's not even talking over here about being paid for your work. You could be at home. Let's say you're a professional tailor and now you're at home and it's on Erev Pesach and you just want to, you iron fantastically. That would be forbidden to do on Erev Pesach, right? Again, specific questions that you might have, you probably need to take to a competent Orthodox rabbi. It's prohibited to get a haircut from midday on Erev Pesach onwards. Haircut, shave. Even if the barber is a non-Jew, you shouldn't be getting your hair cut on Erev Pesach. It's also better to cut your nails before Chatzos on Erev Pesach for those people who cut them, for those of you who bite them. So that's a different inyan altogether. Laundry, that's the last thing over here for Erev Pesach. Laundry is something which should not be done on Erev Pesach after Chatzos. Again, if you're completely stuck, little children have a habit of making themselves dirty continuously.
What is that? What did Chatzos?
Chatzot is midday.
Okay.
right?
Like 12:30 midday?
Well, it depends because we're talking about what are called sha'ot zmaniot. Right now, midday is probably around 12:20. By Pesach time, because they're moving the clocks, it's going to be around 1:15 or something, right? Again, you need to have a Jewish calendar. You can get them in all different kinds of places. You can download them. They're full of different times and times that you need to know. And one of the chatzos hayom. So you need to know when midday is going to be. Most calendars will tell you on Erev Pesach when midday is, because all of these things should not be done right after midday.
Supposedly it's when the sun is directly
Yeah.
overhead.
Yeah.
So
you
all
could.
you have to do is go outside and look up.
That's okay if you're living over here. But if, like me, you come from England, right? They
can't
haven't
see
seen the sun.
Yeah.
There's some kind of a tradition that's passed
Don't
over.
sundials work with clouds anyway?
Sorry?
Don't sundials work with clouds anyway? If you
Not
use
as
like
well.
a magnifying
Oh, in
glass?
England, nothing works.
Well, that was Ireland.
It's part of England, isn't it? We've taken on the customs of all of the people that we that we vanquished. Good. We're going to stop over here, Mitzvah Hashem. Tomorrow, you're not around tomorrow, right?
No, so you can do as much as you want.
Okay, so tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll carry on with the halacha dimension. The Mitzvah Hashem, at some point next week, we'll take a look at the four sons and we'll try to work out what's going on with them.